You're listening to today's inspirational message on the Proverbs with Kurt Bjorklund.
Proverbs 18 is, if we were to look for a theme about where we find security. And there's a juxtaposition. Verse 10, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous man runs into it and is safe. And then in verse 12, we read this: before destruction, a man's heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor. And what pride does is it causes us to think that we are smarter than the system and than other people. Verse 9 again says, whoever slackens his work is a brother to him who destroys. Because when we have pride, we think we're smarter than other people and that we can game the system, that we have ingenuity that others don't have. When we're prideful, what happens is we think that we're shrewd and worthy and that we don't need people. And then what happens, verse 13, is we start to speak before we listen. If one gives an answer before he hears, it's to his folly and shame. And so instead of trusting God, what we do is we trust our ingenuity and we start saying, I've got this thing dialed in. And when we read through the following verses, with the exception of verse 14, which I'll come back to, we see a little bit of how our pride works itself out. Verse 15, an intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Sometimes what we do is we don't actually want to know knowledge, and we don't seek it because we think we have it or we don't want the implications. Verse 16, a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before the great. Bruce Waltke again says that the selfish motives are part of this word gift that's used here in the Hebrew, except for in chapter 19:6. And so this is not considering the dangers of a payoff, either that we use or that others are using. Verse 17 returns to this idea of not hearing both sides. The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. And so we're relying on superficial research or limited information at this point. And then verse 18, the lot puts an end to quarrels and decides between powerful contenders, not wanting to have a powerful contender. Verse 19, a brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle. And so these word pictures are showing this idea that what we tend to do with our pride is elevate ourselves and our thinking rather than saying, I will approach each situation with humility. When the Lord is our strong tower, then we're able to approach situations with humility rather than honor. And when we do that, what happens is we find ourselves moving into the places in our lives where we are not vulnerable because we are not open to this destruction. It says, before destruction, a man's heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor. And so the destruction comes because we're too proud to admit our own fall. There's a old episode of the TV show Frasier. I didn't watch much of this, and so I've read about this. But evidently, Frasier Crane, who's like the big psychologist on the show, had a rough day, and he sits down in a coffee shop, and a man steals his seat. And he grabs the man by the collar, and he runs him out of the shop, saying, what you need is an etiquette lesson. And he chastises himself a little for allowing kind of this outburst of anger, because he thinks of himself as somebody who likes to respond reasonably. And he's a radio psychologist, and he tells the story, and callers start calling in and saying that they need to do exactly what he did. And so one caller calls in and says that his neighbor who used a leaf blower at 7 o'clock in the morning caused him to teach him an etiquette lesson by smashing the leaf blower. Another person takes a pound of rotten shrimp into a rival's air conditioner. And after all of these comments, Fraser says on air that they've gone too far, and he says, I displayed a minor bit of force just to make my point. I didn't go around smashing windows and torching lawns. Where does it end? And his caller says, are you saying that what I did is wrong? And he says, of course I am. And then the man says, but what you did was okay. And this stops Fraser in his tracks. And then he basically says, come to think of it, what I did was just as wrong. I mean, who am I to draw a line at the acceptable level of force? In verse 18 here, again, that says the lot puts an end to quarrels. Or that verse 19, a brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city. You see, Fraser realizes in that moment that God provides us righteousness, and that any sin, whether it's more or less acceptable, is a sin that runs deep inside of us. And that anger, that idea come from a place, and we can't draw a line in that place without ignoring the good grace of God in our lives. Tullian Tchividjian, who I got this story from that I just gave you, in his little book says, today remember that you're worse than you think you are, but remember also that God's gift of righteousness to you is you're greater than you could ever imagine. Running into the Lord is a strong tower, and when we run away from him, then we're taking our security into our own hands.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.